did you make of the Dallas punting those last 2 games of the season?
I think I was reading some Dallas media reports. It's a S show. It's a mess. Well, they hired a guy from Nike who's never been really a GM, but he was in the basketball division, very smart guy, a relationship guy. And now they put him in charge of running, basketball ops. And, I like Mark Cuban. I think he's really smart. He tends to be what I would call a tech optimist. He has so much confidence in his intelligence that he takes big swings, and he hits, his pharmaceutical company's brilliant. I understood. I mean, it was funny when they went and got Kyrie Irving, I applauded it. I said, I like the swing. This is going to be an atrocious defensive team. These are 2 of the worst. I mean, Kyrie is an abysmal defensive player. And so when people kind of embrace this as a championship team, I'm like, guys, the Warriors and Celtics were the 2 best defensive teams in the league. Like, you can't win that way. You can't just score your way. You can't have to score 126 a night. It just doesn't work that way in this sport. And I think people think it's that. And then you if you've ever had a buddy who goes and plays in the NBA, it's like, man, they grind you. There's a lot of contact in this league. In the playoffs, it doubles down on it. That's why, Kyrie pre and post LeBron, he gets pushed around. It was like LeBron was a little bit of a bodyguard, and you have to surround Kyrie with certain elements. I also think increasingly Luka's a moody player, and he's going to be really hard to find the Robin. We talked about this. The hardest thing in basketball is to find the Giannis, that once in a franchise player. So the Bucks have done it twice. Lou Alcindor and Giannis. They got a championship one back in 1971, right? Milwaukee. And they got one with Giannis. It's not a great free agent hub, so you have to kind of build a culture. And then eventually, Kareem, I want out. I want to go west. He did. And so I think when Luka came into the league, there was this sense you could pair him with a lot. So they try the slasher, Porzingis. They don't like each other. And then they tried Jalen Brunson, and they're like, well, they don't really fit. Well, Jalen's been like an MVP guard play in New York. Well, let's try Kyrie. Well, now Kyrie doesn't perfectly work for him. We're falling in love with this great hyper offensive player. Moody, difficult, needs ball, won't defend. Is he going to end up Carmelo Anthony, where he has this early success in Denver and never really then galvanizes people? I mean, you start looking at the great players of all time, everybody needed a running mate. Like Magic galvanized people, LeBron galvanized people. Michael didn't, but he found a running mate, right? Like some guys don't do that, but they find a guy. Tim Duncan finds his Tony Parker. Steph finds his Clay. Like, it's way harder to find a 2 because it's not just the player, it's the temperament. McHale was the college, you wouldn't remember this because you're young, he led the nation in rebounding. He was known as a defensive guy that rebounded at Minnesota, and he came to the NBA with all these weird moves, and he was super long, kind of an unorthodox looking scorer, but he was a great rebounder, a shot blocker in college, and Bird was the scorer. Well, McHale could have scored more. But okay, I'm going to be part of this. Bosh in Miami, I want to be part of this. Kevin Love in Cleveland with LeBron, I want to be part of it. Like, Luka's going to make you feel small. He's not going to help you on the defensive end. You're going to get the ball late in the shot clock with him. I think Luka's harder to play with than people think. And you say, well, Michael was difficult, but Michael got the right coach, also found a very willing Robin. And then he had high-functioning players. Kerr and Paxson became GMs. Like, they knew how to play with Michael. They understood Michael was the guy. Those Bull teams had really high... B.J. Armstrong becomes a power agent. Like, you had a lot of guys around Michael that knew how to play the game and appeal to his senses and his alpha. That's hard. Like, that Luka's going to be hard to play with, and I think we have to come to terms with it.
He's entering a very important phase of his basketball development because he's starting to just slightly plateau a little bit. And, I love the way you broke it down. Like, you have to be willing to buy into this like larger concept of the team. Because, for instance, like, you can break it down on a simple math level. Okay, Luka, high pick and roll, is worth 1.2 points per possession. Therefore, if we run it 100 times in a game, we're going to score 120 points. That's great. You know what I mean? But there is a basketball team is a living organism, and all of the pieces fit together. And like, it would behoove Luka to start to learn how to adjust his game to fit better with others because of the specific fact that he will be on more talented teams as time go along. This has worked. He went to the Western Conference Finals last year. I'm not trying to criticize him overall in terms of what he's capable of, but the reality is like, hey, if you give the ball to Kyrie, and maybe instead of running a high pick and roll where you dribble the air out of the basketball for 17 seconds, maybe you run down the floor and come off of a wide screen and use that as a dribble handoff and get downhill. You can use your same skill set, that same vision, that same size and strength and shot making ability more within the flow of what a team can do as a unit together, and then embracing getting in shape to be able to be more of an impact player defensively. I think, look, here's the thing. The pouting, I absolutely believe that has a negative effect on the psyche of a basketball team. When they see their star constantly bitching and moaning at the refs, and when he's constantly not running back on defense, and you can tell his head is not in it. I loved how you brought up Carmelo Anthony, because that's such an interesting comp to me. Because
they're obviously different positions, but everybody said they loved Carmelo. Man, he gave you. It was about Carmelo getting his shot. He wouldn't even adjust to a 3-point shot. Like he was bizarrely rigid in his style of play.
100%. Like they're not the same player, obviously. It's more just relative to the rest of the league and the way his progression went. Like LeBron was a little bit better than Carmelo, and over the years, LeBron kept getting better, and Melo just kind of stayed the same. I mean, he got moderately better in some areas of his offensive skill set, but he never became an impact defensive player. He never became a top tier playmaker. He never evolved in those other areas of his game, and LeBron
was threatened.
Yes.
Yes, and I think Luka at times feels a little threatened. First of all, he's from outside of the country, so players like that, you have to ingratiate yourself to a new culture and a new country. That's really difficult. The other thing, Jason, is if you look at Dirk Nowitzki in Dallas, probably as beloved a player as the league's had. Everybody loved Dirk. Not everybody loves Luka. He's got a much more temperamental, moody personality. So he's naturally going to create some disharmony in the room. He's just a moody guy. Dirk wasn't. So the Mavericks multiple times switched pieces with Dirk. Almost everything worked with Dirk. It just didn't get a championship. But there was no clashes of culture. Everybody liked Dirk. Nobody likes Luka. It's a big difference. I think Luka's a better player, but at this point, somebody said this years ago to me. They're like, in football, halftime, defense goes to the right, offense goes to the left. In baseball, a third of the team's in the bullpen. It's 13 dudes on the bench, every practice, on that plane. If one guy's music's too loud on the plane, now you have headphones now, but years ago, it's like, one guy can ruin an NBA locker room. And if the star is difficult, it's a bad locker room. I think the Mavs are a bit of an S show right now. And I think Luka, again, they're gonna put the PR people to work in Dallas. It's all good. Luka's gonna love it. But when you watch him play, he aggravates me at times with his barking to the officials, on every play.
It's such a love-hate relationship for me, because as a basketball fan, there's so many things with Luka that I'm drawn to. He is one of the best players that I've ever seen in terms of beating people off the dribble without an athletic advantage, which is so hard to do. It's kind of the Austin Reeves thing. It's all misdirection and having every move irrevocably attached to a counter move that's equally as effective, and never telegraphing your moves. And Luka, there's so many things that I love about his game, and I hate watching him because of his approach, not only with the heliocentric, just dribble the air out of the basketball every time, but also with the attitude stuff. And again, it's a crossroads. He's either going to be the Carmelo of this era, or he's going to be an all-time great. And what's interesting is, if you would have asked everybody 2 years ago, or I'll even just say last year during the Western Conference Finals, who are the two best players, that you'd want for the next 10 years? It'd be Giannis and Luka, and it'd be pretty close, right? Like they'd be neck and neck with a slight edge to Giannis. I hope it doesn't end up being one of those situations where Giannis just dramatically separates himself.
It could.
Because Luka plateaus. That's a problem potentially.
Well, I mean, listen, LeBron was more physically gifted than Carmelo, but as they drifted apart, a lot of it was LeBron got along with more players, could play with more players, was more amenable to different styles. I mean, Miami had no size. He and Wade were duplication. He never liked Mario Chalmers. I mean, it was like they threw him with Ray Allens and Shane Battier's and Mike Millers, and LeBron made it work. At the time, Spoelstra was a kid coach, and LeBron made it work. And then he goes to Cleveland again, and he makes it work. And he goes to Los Angeles, and he makes it work. If you give LeBron, I mean, J.R. Smith was fun, but I think people forget he and LeBron were pretty good together. And J.R. Smith was weird and, a little eccentric, and some viewed as difficult, kind of an ISO act, super talented. LeBron made it work. LeBron and him were close, despite that one timeout, right, that they called. So, and I think Giannis sort of is amenable to a lot of different teammates and players. Luka so far isn't. Like, I mean, look at, they just bring in Jay Crowder and then Joe Ingles and Drew Holiday, and Chris Middleton was like, they stole him, I think, from like Detroit. He's worked with all of them. He works with everybody. And Brook Lopez, another big, he's not threatened at all. Like, it matters a lot. And it's just like, I always felt Carmelo was threatened. Luka feels a little threatened. Giannis never does. LeBron never has. I mean, God, he goes into Miami. It's D-Wade City. And it's like, all right, let's go for it. I mean, he could have picked anywhere to go, right? He goes to probably the single most beloved player in any city. I'll go to your city. I mean, that was rife with issues. Could you have seen Carmelo going down there and making it work? His insecurities would have just flourished. So I'm not anti-Luka, but it's just like we've got to have, I think we're moving to the second phase, which is, okay, not all these issues are Carmelo Anthony's teammates. Some are Carmelo.
Yeah, it's time. It's time to make the adjustments. And it's not over. Like, to be clear, there's a huge reason why they punted these last two games. It got them down to the 10th worst record in the league, which saved them, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, from a pick protection that will give them a first-round pick in this draft that they would not have had otherwise had they made the play-in. You attach that pick to Tim Hardaway Jr.'s salary, and you bring in, a do-everything forward, and they target some guys, on the fringes this summer. They can absolutely be a relevant team next year, but they will only go as far as Luka can take them, and he won't take them very far unless he starts to identify some of these issues. I think that's all very fair criticism.